Here are the most overrated Pokemon to ever be released inside Pokemon Unite. Hello everybody, Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Let's get into it. I have a few fun videos planned like this while I will be at LAIC commentating the first event for the new season of Unite. I'm very excited to see what that's like. A crowd in Brazil I assume is going to be hyped, so I cannot wait. I hope to see you there live. But before that, or after that, depending on when this video drops, let's talk about some of the most overrated Pokemon in the game. Before we jump into our first Pokemon, I just quickly want to say that just because a Pokemon is overrated doesn't mean it's not good at times, even very good at certain moments. I just think people overvalue this Pokemon for its output, and things go up and down throughout the balance of the game. So there could be times where this Pokemon was fairly rated and then people are kind of like not remembering that it was nerfed, etc. You get what I'm trying to say. You could play any of these Pokemon. I just find the community to value some of them way too much. In no particular order, but I feel like this is a good one to start with, Goodra. Goodra has been one of the most overrated Pokemon that has ever come to Unite, and I think it is because of the Goodra effect. I made a video about the Goodra effect. If I'm smart, a thumbnail of that video would pop up right there. If I'm not, here we are.
It takes an advanced sense of humor. I don't expect everybody to understand.
Goodra has never had a high win rate, never done well competitively outside of a few teams that gave it some shots, and it had some okay results. In general, the issue with Goodra, of course, is that it is a defender that doesn't really disrupt the enemy team enough at certain times to compete with others like Trevenant or Umbreon or something like that that have massive disruption options for the opposing team. Instead, it's a defender that relies on your opponents being foolish enough to engage it when it can restore all of its HP very, very quickly. I think the big thing with Goodra is you will have moments in your games that feel amazing because Goodra has some really cool mechanics that let you pop off and take 50,000 damage before going down. But in reality, in a game with skilled players, Goodra doesn't always get to do what it would like to do. However, in your solo queue games, you can have amazing games with Goodra. And in fact, before I continue to another Pokemon, I should mention that all of these Pokemon can do really well in their games. I just find them to be particularly overrated. Goodra, you're overrated, buddy. Our next Pokemon is going to be Garchomp. Garchomp is an interesting one because Garchomp is actually pretty dang good right now. But for a long time near the start of the game, there was, or not even the start, I say start, but I think like I'm talking about almost like a year and a half, 2 years or something. This game had Garchomp fans, and I get it. It's a really fun Pokemon. You could do cool things with it, but it was so undertuned compared to the rest of the roster for the longest time. We finally got good Garchomp buffs, and now it's actually something that you can compete with. But for the longest time, this thing was just an absolute stomper of noobs, which I think most overrated Pokemon happen to be. They're Pokemon that when you encounter them at your early stages of learning the game, you think they're insane because you just don't know how to counter what they're doing, which a lot of the times is actually pretty simple. While we're on the topic of some of these big monsters, let's talk about Tyranitar. The issue with Tyranitar is it did have moments in the game that were crazy good, but they were really short-lived. And I think the ultimate potential of Tyranitar is what leads people to think that it's actually better than it is. It has its moments, and when played well, it's actually pretty decent, but it has issues that Goodra has, like people just standing next to it and fighting it. If you're foolish enough to do that, well, Tyranitar is going to be eaten pretty well. And it has issues that some other Pokemon really don't. It is a very slow climb to becoming a good Pokemon. And I love the design of its kit for that reason. It's just clearly been incredibly hard to balance and has only had a few flashes in the meta. Our next Pokemon is the game's mascot, Pikachu. You know, for the longest time, Pikachu was rated very low. And to be fair, I think a lot of people at different times, myself included, had Pikachu sort of outside the realm of possibility. And it's only recently that people have noticed this thing is very good. A few things to note. It did get a really great change to its Unite move. And the last patch before its nerfs, I think it was legitimately a top tier mage choice. Fully. But I think it kind of like became one of those things that people obsessed over, not realizing that Pika had slowly been creeping up in viability for a super long time. We just didn't notice it as a community. There were moments where I thought, dang, this thing is actually getting really good. I remember talking about how it's a great counter for some of the things running into the game. And then all of a sudden, a couple of buffs happen, people start playing Pika again, and now I actually think we have an outsized view of how good Pika is. I think Pika is a really good mage. I do not think it's broken, and I think there was a time where people thought it was bad, and it was actually still a really good mage. Next on our list is Sabal Ey. Sabal Ey is weird. Sabal Ey released broken, and then they kind of tuned it in a way where Shadow Sneak really is no longer the thing at all, and now Sabal Ey is in this questionable spot. Here's the issue with Sabal Ey, okay? Here's what makes it overrated, and I do think it's good. Again, don't get me wrong, things on this list are good, and you can win with them. I just think it's overrated. Sabal Ey, it's actually could be a both list, guys. It's at one time underrated and overrated. In the hands of a bad player, this thing is one of the worst Pokemon in the game. And in the hands of a great player, this thing is beautiful. And when you have it on your team, it feels like it does nothing. And when it's on the enemy team, it feels like it does everything. I think this Pokemon is super hard to sort of pin down in how viable it is, or how good it is, or how competitive it is, because it just varies so wildly match to match, player to player. So I think people who are worried about Sabal Ey, you don't have much to worry about. The Sabal Ey player base out there will not be a huge game changer. However, every once in a while you run into one that makes you think this thing is absolutely broken, and more than anything, it will drive you nuts during your game, so you will freak out about it. I think, again, this one could go on both lists as being highly overrated and highly underrated. Next on my list, Scizor. Scizor is one of the most overrated Pokemon to ever exist, and for some reason people like playing Jungle Scizor in my games, and it is a horrible decision. I don't know why people choose to do this. It's just a very weird choice, but they really like doing it, and they never go back to Jungle. All right, I'm just complaining about my solo queue games right now. Scizor and Goodra have the same thing. You can pop off with them, and there's actually some really cool plays you can make with Scizor. Its Unite move is really great for deleting a lot of squishy Pokemon in the back line as well. But I think the big thing that keeps Scizor so overrated all the time are the moments you have where you survive a battle that feels like you couldn't have, but because of Bullet Punch, you last longer and longer and longer. And what's really happening is people are making the horrible decision, or you just got into a good situation and you fought them well, where you are fighting the enemy team for way too long, and they are giving you way too many opportunities to do well. Because you can run into enemies that just set up moments for you, Scizor is going to feel great sometimes. You're gonna feel like a god, even though you're kind of mid. Not you, by the way. You might be a god. We only have one god around here. We're not freaking Norse. But Scizor is mid. Next is Snorlax. Not all of Snorlax, but Flail Snorlax. Flail Snorlax can win games. Flail Snorlax is surprising. Flail Snorlax, since the beginning of this game, has been one of the most overrated builds in the entire game. It is very cheesy. It is really inconsistent. Just because you win some games with it doesn't mean it's the defender your team needed. You will just as often hurt your team's chances having Flail as you will help your team. Probably more often, I would say, you hurt your team's chances. And for whatever reason, it's the build everyone wants to play because it can carry, and you don't feel like you're carrying as hard with Heavy Slam. I get it, but super underrated. Forever it's been overrated. Did I say underrated? Oh my gosh. Finally, I want to talk about Gengar. Gengar has been one of the most overrated Pokemon since the game's release. In fact, I even think the early Gengar, while yes, it did deserve a nerf, was actually probably a little over nerfed because it was such a destructive force when the game launched and nobody had any idea how to play the video game. In that time, I actually think they made the right decision with it. But since then, there are always pockets where people think it is so incredibly good just because you can use Dream Eater Shadow Ball and KO an enemy. Like, it is doing its job sometimes by getting a string of KOs. For the longest time, this thing has been a bottom tier speedster for sure. It just happens to pop off if it has an extreme, my Pokemon Pocket let me know I have a pack available to open. It happens to pop off when you have an extreme level advantage and when the enemy team is uncoordinated. And this has given people the illusion, Michael, that this thing is broken. It is not broken. It really never has been. It is finally doing somewhat decent, and I think that's good. There are a few that I could have put on this list that I actually left off here, but I would love to hear from you in the comments with some of these. As always, I'm open to the disagreement. Please let me know what I got right. Let me know what I got wrong. Be cool to each other. I love seeing like the comments in the chat with it as well. The chat in the comments, I guess, is a better way to say that. I like seeing the back and forth as long as we're all cool to each other. Please let me know what I missed. There's actually one Pokemon I left off that I just wanted to see if a bunch of people want to say it. I've got it on my list right here. I feel like I should hide it in a locked box and then open it just to prove to you all, like, I kind of wanted to put this Pokemon here. But anyway, thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope you checked out LAIC. Love you. See you soon. We did it.